Welcome back to yet another bonus episode of Krewe Japan. This time diving back into the world of Japanese soccer, because somehow it's already World Cup time. About a year ago, we brought on journalist and Japanese soccer guru Dan Orlowitz for a two-part deep dive into the J-League, Samurai Blue, and Japan's growing presence in the global game. During those conversations, naturally, we spent a little time looking ahead to Japan's prospects heading into the 2026 FIFA World Cup.
One season later.
Well, here we are. 2026 World Cup is here. Group stage kicks off for the Samurai Blue on June 14th. Japan's roster is basically locked in, barring any kind of injury, and suddenly everything is starting to feel very, very real, very, very fast for both the team and fans back in Japan, and fans around the world. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not a soccer expert. I know enough to be dangerous, like ball plus net equal goal levels of dangerous, and I know enough to genuinely be excited about what Japan can do in this tournament. But for the real breakdown, I needed to call on the reinforcements. AKA, I slid back into Dan's DMs and asked him to bless us with a little more soccer wisdom. And thankfully for all of us, he graciously agreed. Today, we're talking roster surprises, key players to watch, group stage matchups, broader World Cup predictions, figuring out how far the Samurai Blue can realistically go, and what a deep run would mean not only for the national team, but for their fans back in Japan. This episode is the perfect primer for rabid soccer fans and World Cup casuals alike. So let's just jump into it with Dan Orlowitz. Let's go. All right, with World Cup kind of creeping back up, I know we had an episode almost a year ago to the day where we brought on a Japanese soccer expert who reports, covers, photographs, everything, bleeds Japanese soccer. So we have Dan Orlowitz back on the podcast. Welcome back, Dan.
Good to be on. Thanks for having me back. Wow, it really has been a year. A lot of
Yeah. Well, I think last time when we were talking, we had one other person. We had Nigel here with us. Unfortunately, Nigel couldn't be here today. So we're going to have to do a little bit of role playing here. You're going to have to role play the Japanese soccer expert. And I'm going to role play a guy who very casually watches soccer and may or may not really know what he's talking about. So that's the role I'm going to take on today. How's that sound to you? Are you comfortable with your role?
I think we can make that work.
Yeah. Sorry, Nigel. I know if you're listening out there, I'm not doing you justice, but I'll try. Last time we had you on, we talked about Japanese soccer kind of broadly from a J-League perspective. And then we also talked about the World Cup. We speculated about where's Japan going to be in a year? What is this going to look like? Well, here we are. Fast forward 365-ish days and the World Cup. World Cup. That's the outtakes right there. The World Cup kicks off in less than a month. We're recording this just maybe a week and a half out from the send-off game on the 29th, was it?
It was the 31st against
31st.
Iceland. Yep.
That's right. So the 31st against Iceland in the National Stadium, right?
That's correct. The newly renamed MUFG Stadium.
The Mufka.
Yeah, the bank, they got the naming rights for however long. But, we still call it the National Stadium.
Yeah. So, World Cup is right around the corner. I know this is like prime time for you. This is like when you're getting all hyped up. So how excited are you right now?
I think that especially when you're following Japan, it's kind of because Japan as a whole isn't necessarily as aware of the political side of this World Cup and all of the sort of everything else that's surrounding it. It's much easier for fans here to just focus on the team and that, for better or for worse. I think, as Americans, we have our own perspective, but for the Japanese perspective, this is potentially, the biggest World Cup in Japan's history in terms of the potential for how far this team can go. You've got arguably the strongest team that we've ever sent to the World Cup. The qualifying cycle, this World Cup cycle, has been, as far as results go, the best that Japan has ever experienced. In contrast to Qatar, we came in with a lot of question marks, and Russia in 2018, where there were also a lot of question marks, and the new coach less than 2 months before the tournament. We feel good. So I think fans are excited, and there's going to be a huge presence of Japanese supporters in Dallas, which is where Japan will play 2 of its 3 group stage games. And the media are cautious. I think everyone is a little afraid to be as optimistic as they are because Japan has never come into the World Cup in this much of a position of strength.
Yeah, I was about to say, I feel like every time they come into the World Cup, at least the last couple, they've been kind of the underdog, right? They've been like, especially last time there was a group of death, they had like crazy good teams in their group that, they ended up beating a couple of them, right? So they kind of came in there and shocked the world a little bit with how they played. So now it's like, okay, well, the pressure's on. The stage is set. And we were talking about it last year when we were recording our other episode. This is Japan's time to shine, right? Like, this is kind of it. Like, they've been building towards this. They have a young core, a good core, and really deep, too, from what I remember.
And it's interesting that 2022 squad was in many ways transitioning from maybe transitioning is a weird way to say it, because I believe 19 of those players were in their first World Cup.
Yeah.
And this year, I believe it's like half and half. 13 are at their first, going to be at their first World Cup, and 13 will be at least their second. But it's a very young squad relative to what Japan has fielded in the past. Only one player with over 100 caps. A cap is sort of like an appearance for the senior national team. Only 4 players are above 50 caps. So
wow.
It shows that this is what they're calling kind of the new golden generation, where 2002 was in many ways sort of the gold generation, and then the 2010 2014 era, that was kind of like the platinum generation with like Keisuke Honda and Shinji Kagawa and that sort of thing. And now we've evolved. These generational names don't really matter. It depends on who you're talking to and what their preference is, but it feels like a new Japan.
Yeah.
We hope that they're capable of big things.
They set the stage over the last few years with the friendlies and the international tournaments and qualifiers, kind of, because I think you said this was the earliest they had ever qualified for a World Cup this past time, right?
Right. So with the expanded World Cup, we've gone from 32 to 48 teams. So the path was much easier for Japan to qualify. For better or for worse, I think that's a deeper discussion for another podcast probably, but they cakewalked. I mean, the funny thing is that their final group, we looked at it as fairly challenging with Australia, Saudi Arabia, China, who, when they're capable of doing so, can put up a good fight. But Australia and Saudi Arabia were just sort of stepping on rakes for half of the qualifiers, and Japan just plowed through them. So that was the easy part. And then the hard part is after you qualify, just how are you looking at these player combinations? How are you testing things? So Hajime Oriyasu, the head coach, he went through, I believe, 89 players, or 89 players got call-ups during this cycle. I believe that number came up during the press conference last week. And so he's had a chance to see quite a few players. And you could probably put together an A squad, a B squad, and a C squad from all of that. But of course, it's not just about how good are the players individually, but how well do they work together. And so the hope is that this 26 is Japan's strongest 26. And we'll get into those names coming up. But as you referred to, I mean, they came out of the last World Cup having beaten Germany and Spain in what was supposed to be a group of death. They beat Germany again in a friendly. They beat Brazil in a friendly for the first time. They beat England in a friendly for the first time. They put Scotland to the sword pretty easily before taking on England. And to beat England at Wembley, that's a huge deal. To come from behind to beat Brazil, that game was in Tokyo back in October. That's a huge deal. Now, them facing Brazil in a friendly versus them facing Brazil potentially in the round of 32, those are two different games. And I think that there's so many variables to this tournament that's hard to game out how these matchups could potentially go. But basically only one loss that counts in the last year. That was a friendly against the US with like a rotated squad back in September. So overall, Japan has never had this good a run-in to the World Cup in terms of not just the results, but results against very good teams.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you just mentioned. I know the Samurai Blue, the head coach, just announced the final 26 roster selection just this past week. So listeners may recall some of these names from our season 6 soccer doubleheader. But who do you think some of those core players will be that are going to be carrying the squad, hopefully past group play into the tournament?
There's an elephant in the room, and that is who isn't in the squad, which I think you're probably in the green room, we were talking about how we're going to discuss this, but the big story is that Kaoru Mitoma isn't in the squad because he hurt his hamstring a week before it was announced, and the team medical staff determined that he isn't going to be able to recover in time for the tournament. So he's not there, and people are portraying that as a big loss for Japan, which of course it is. But there is a lot of not just experience, but just a lot of good players in here. You have on defense, I think the most important player from a starting position would be Takehiro Tomiyasu, central defender. So he played at Ajax for this last half season. A veteran in a sense. I mean, he was at Arsenal and newly crowned Premier League champions, Arsenal, I should say. And he was let go after last season because I think he had injury issues and he was recovering and just didn't work out for him in the long run there.
Yeah.
But his presence is really key on the back line. You have midfield, one of the more controversial in a way selections is Wataru Endo, who has been Japan's captain over this cycle. And is a great player, but also he's been dealing with injury issues over at Liverpool. So is he going to be fit enough to do what he has to do? I mean, that's a big question, but definitely a composed veteran who has been here before and he's a leader.
Right.
So
he's got the experience.
Exactly. You've got, I think Daichi Kamada is also in there. Ritsu Doan, who's with Eintracht Frankfurt this season, he obviously played a huge role in the World Cup 4 years ago. Ao Tanaka, who's been doing great at Leeds. Takefusa Kubo, who was kind of pegged to be Japan's star in Qatar, didn't quite have the breakout World Cup that people expected of him. But with 4 years of experience, he's still he's going to turn 25 just before the tournament starts. And he's an amazing player. So at each position, at each line in the formation, you have a couple leaders, and then you also have a bunch of new players who have come into the national team picture over the last year and a half, who will bring something new and something special to this squad. I haven't even mentioned, I think the biggest leader, either on or off the pitch, is going to be Yuto Nagatomo, FC Tokyo defender who was selected for his 5th World Cup. I remember seeing him as in 2010. I was there for the last game he played for FC Tokyo before that World Cup. Went to South Africa, and then the next time he came back, it was to greet the fans because he had signed with Cesena in Italy. And For the last 4 seasons, he's been back at FC Tokyo, and he was selected for Qatar. Now he's selected for North America. So it's a huge thing for him. And will he start every game? No. Will he play in every game? Probably not. But he's been through it all. If you look at these last 4 World Cups, what he's experienced and what he can bring to the squad and to these younger, less experienced players is just invaluable.
Yeah. I mean, having that veteran presence in the locker room, especially with a team that is, like you said, kind of up and coming. Maybe they have like half of them going into the first World Cup. So having someone like that, being a calming presence in the locker room, kind of say, hey, I've been through some good World Cups. I've been through some bad ones. We got this. He kind of helped kind of get the team centered. So it's really good to have. Now, were there any names that you were surprised that didn't make the team? Or maybe some names that you saw on the team that you were like, whoa, I was expecting somebody else?
That was the interesting thing in terms of the dynamic heading into the squad announcement. There's usually a few sort of unsettled positions where you don't know who's going to get picked for sort of, not necessarily the first 18 players, but the last 5 to 8. I say 5 because I'm going back to when World Cup squads were 23 players. And it's only been these last couple World Cups that were 26. So if you look at this lineup, at this squad, there's nobody you can absolutely say shouldn't be there. I think Nagatomo is probably the most controversial because I think there's split opinions over, well, if he's just going to be the locker room presence, shouldn't he have gone as like support staff?
Right.
So for example, Takumi Minamino, Monaco attacker, he has been recovering from, I think, either an ACL thing or another ligament thing. And there was some buildup. He started training with the ball again a couple weeks ago. There was some talk that maybe he's healthy enough to get back in, because he scored in that win over Brazil. I don't always rate him as high as others do, but he's definitely a key man on the attack. So him not making the squad was not necessarily surprising, but a little disappointing. Hidemasa Morita, a central midfielder at Sporting in Portugal, His omission was probably one of the most surprising. He hasn't been in the national team setup for about a year now, but he's been doing great at his club. Tactically, is he what Moriyasu wants? I guess that's a good question now that sort of Moriyasu has changed his system, to a 3-back, and clearly Moriyasu did not see Morita fitting into his plans. But it does leave Japan a little thin at that position where if Wataru Endo gets injured or if, Daichi Kamada gets hurt, then you've only got 2 more natural central midfielders in terms of Al Tanaka and Kaishu Sano. So then you need a central defender to step up. So this is all, I'm not going to bore your listeners with like the weird tactical minutia, but this is like the math that you have to do as a head coach, because it's not like club soccer where week after week you can bring a different bench to your game.
Yeah.
Until that first game, or until I think the day before that first game, Japan can swap out anyone. So if there's an injury at the Iceland friendly, at their pre-tournament camp in Mexico, if something happens, there will be backup members.
Okay.
And they will be able to call people in. So, for example, if, let's say, hypothetically, knock on wood that it doesn't happen, if Wataru Endo were to hurt himself at the pre-tournament camp, I think Morita gets the call.
Okay. He's on the short list.
You have to imagine he's on the short list. I can't imagine who you would call. I can't imagine who Moriyasu would skip over Morita to get to at this point.
I gotcha.
But, so like those were the more notable absences. And of course, Kaoru Mitoma, who is the biggest star on this Japan team, if you can call him that, because like he's not quite the star power of like Keisuke Honda or Hidetoshi Nakata back in the old days, but like he's still a star.
Yeah.
And definitely the most popular player that a lot of overseas fans will know, because he's been in the Premier League and he's been an amazing player at Brighton. So Mitoma, Morita, and Minamino being absent, not totally surprising. We all knew it was kind of coming, but lots of people would say they wanted, for obvious reasons, they wanted them in.
Right.
As far as surprise inclusions, I think Kento Shiogai and Keisuke Goto, the strikers, they're the youngest players in the squad. They're both, I think Goto is going to turn 21 just before the tournament. And
he's a baby.
He's a baby, and Shiogai just turned 21 back in March. So these are babies. They've only been in Europe for about a year.
Yeah.
Shiogai has 1 cap. Keisuke Goto has 3. Like, will they play a huge role in this squad? Probably not. But a lot of things can happen in the run-in, in the training camps. If Moriyasu sees something he likes...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and whatever criticism I've had of Moriyasu in the past, like I think we all will still say, he seems to know what he's doing.
So let me stop you right there and say, like, all right, if he knows what he's doing and this is the team that he selected, in a few sentences, how would you explain the team's identity? What would that be based on how you've seen this roster kind of shake out and based on, like what you think it's going to be going into the tournament?
It's so hard to peg an identity on this team because there's just no egos on this team. And that's
it's a kind of an identity right there, right?
I think unity is like the one word that like, it's such a cliche, especially when it comes to any Japanese sports related branding. But like the Samurai Blue always perform best when it's a case of like the whole has to be greater than the sum of its parts. And sometimes we don't get that. In 2014, we didn't get that. But like in 2022, all of those, the big goals against Germany and against Spain, none of those are coming from pure individual brilliance. They're all team goals.
Mm-hmm.
Where like, yes, the players involved are being brilliant, but they are working together in their brilliance. Japan does best when it doesn't have to lean on like your Messis, your Cristiano Ronaldos, that sort of thing. Like, I think we get in trouble when we expect that one player is going to step up and be the savior. And in this squad, I see 26 players who, can I imagine exactly how they'll fit together? I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't feel like a team that's going to be consumed by someone having an ego.
Right. You kind of have to, with the inexperience there, you need to lean on each other to kind of help elevate one another. You can't just lean on someone who's a stud. Now, you have a couple guys, like you said, have been around for a while, but they're also a little up there in age too, and maybe recovering from an injury and can't really give it their all, right? So you have to really rely on your teammates and kind of put your best foot forward, I guess.
If you look at Japan's last two World Cup exits, they were up against Belgium, and then in the span of about a minute, it all falls apart and they give up a couple goals. And, they took Croatia to the limit, in Qatar, and then just nobody was ready for penalties. And Japan got spooked and paid the iron price for that. Yep. And so, like, in this squad, you have players who were there for that Croatia game. You have players who weren't there, but were probably up watching the game on TV. And, they felt that. Every World Cup for Japan is kind of learning, like, it's like when you're playing a video game and it's like, oh, this is the part where I'm supposed to jump. This is the part where I'm supposed to use the fireball. This is the part where I have to actually be patient and time my attacks. Like, Japan keeps getting further and further and further, but we're kind of at the limit of how far we can go without making a big leap, because it doesn't matter how close a game you play in the round of 16. Whether you're losing after 90 minutes or losing in extra time or losing in penalties, you're still going home.
Right.
So the question is this the squad that's going to make that next big leap and beat the boss and get to the quarterfinals, which has been Japan's goal for the last 20 years?
So let's take a look then at group stage. They're with Tunisia, Sweden, and the Netherlands. So of that group, which team do you feel is Japan's biggest threat, and why is it the Netherlands?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. The way that these groups are structured, obviously, there's the four pots that the teams are drawn for, and Netherlands are deservedly in pot one, but they have been kind of underperforming the last couple of World Cups. I think Netherlands, their reputation carries them a lot further than some of their recent competitive results would indicate.
Yeah, and as a casual role player right now, I would say that, that's where, for me, it's the Netherlands.
2010, they were runners up, famously against Spain. 2014, they finished in third. Then they missed out on Russia entirely and didn't qualify. They only made the quarterfinals in Qatar. And then you look at their performance in Europe. They made the semifinals 2 years ago in the Euros, but that was their first semifinals since 2004. They didn't even qualify in 2016. So very inconsistent. Are they beatable? Absolutely. Are they going to be the toughest game of the group stage? Absolutely. The most important thing is that that's the first game. And that's the match that's going to set the tone for Japan's entire tournament. So, like, if you draw, then, like, it's not the worst result. If you win, if you beat Netherlands in your opening game, that's a statement of intent. Like, that is massive. It is a morale booster to the team. It's a morale booster to the fans. It takes so much more pressure off, especially in a tournament like this where we're playing one more game than we have until now, because now we have the round of 32 in addition to the round of 16. The timeline is compressed to get that one more game in. Tunisia, I mean, North African teams are very tough. They're very disciplined. Tunisia will be no different, and there'll be a challenge. But I think, for my money, I think Sweden could be like a bogey opponent in a way. Like, they were terrible in qualifying. They actually basically snuck into the European qualifying playoffs by their Nations League record and managed to pull off a couple big wins against Ukraine and Poland, and now they're in the World Cup. But they've stumbled in, and they've got a new coach, and I think Swedish fans feel a lot better now than they did half a year ago, obviously. But, you're looking at the height, the speed, the physicality, those Nordic teams are always going to be a challenge for Japanese players who, despite however much they've bulked up in Europe, they're going to be a little shorter.
I was about to say, those European Nordic teams, man, the length always seems to be a challenge for Japan.
And the question is going to be, where does Japan stand going into the Sweden game, which is the group stage finale? If they need the win, then you have to start your best players, which leaves them more tired before the round of 32. If you don't need the win, then you can rotate a bit and give them some rest. if you are trying to get points to figure out how much gamesmanship do you want in terms of where do you finish in the group,
Right.
because that affects who you play in the knockout tournament. And because I think that it's not a bold prediction to say that Japan are going to get to the knockout tournament. Either they're finishing first or they're finishing, you can finish third and still advance. And I think that they're good enough to finish high enough to advance. I think they'll finish first or second, probably second, but if they beat Netherlands, then they can finish first. The challenge will be in the round of 32, assuming they finish first or second, they'll play either the first or second place from Group C, which will very likely be Brazil or Morocco. And that's rough.
Yeah.
I do not want to play Brazil in like a knockout scenario, at least not until the quarterfinals. Morocco would be the better of the two, but they're like a really crafty sounds too complimentary. They pulled some massive shithousery at the African Cup of Nations a few months ago, stealing the opposing goalkeeper's towels. So they basically sued because Senegal won that game, and then Morocco sued and the Court of Arbitration for Sport to like overturn the result, or the African Confederation like overturned the result and disqualified Senegal and gave Morocco the win, and Senegal is appeal. It's a mess, but like,
man, where was this ruling when we had the NFC Championship game and the Saints got no call? We needed that there, man.
You know what? Well, that's what you get when you're in a franchise. I mean, it's a franchise system, but like,
yeah.
Man, imagine an NFL team. I don't think that most NFL players know that the Court of Arbitration for Sport exists, but
yeah,
that's another that is another episode. But my point is, are Japan ready to go up against a team that will play a little dirty?
Yeah,
and that's like, we don't know. But once you're past that, you're into the round of 16. Could be against any number of really solid teams. You look at all these like tournament simulators, anyone. So it's really, really, really tough. But yeah, I like Japan's chances of getting through. The question is what happens next.
So outside of Japan, let's look at the World Cup as a whole. What other teams are you kind of looking forward to seeing play this year in the World Cup?
That's a good question. For better or for worse, like this tournament, because it's been expanded to 48 teams, like it's so diluted. Like there's just going to be so much soccer. And, the question is like, how exciting will it be to have, and we've got 12 groups.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot to keep track of. It's exhausting for fans. It's exhausting for media who have to keep track of all of it. And really, each group only has a couple like really marquee matchups. And some groups are better than others, but like nobody's, who's super excited for like Qatar versus Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Right.
Who is like staying up all night to watch Iraq versus Norway? I'm sure Norwegian fans are going to be excited about it. Iraqi fans are going to be excited. But like these games, they don't have the pull that, like, for example, Group H will have Spain, Uruguay. That'll be pretty big. Group K will have Portugal, Colombia. That'll be big. Group L will have Croatia, England. That'll be big. But like, it's not really until the knockout stage that you're getting what we consider to be like the marquee matchups. And even then, like, we could get France versus Germany, which is like a very quarterfinal, semifinal coded match in the round of 16.
Yeah.
But like we could also have like what the round of 32 could look like. And it could be like Netherlands versus Scotland. It could be Spain versus Jordan. Like, are these what knockout matches should look like? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I didn't really think about it. I mean, usually when World Cup's coming on, I have it on in the background while I'm working. 3 or 4 games that are on during the course of a day. But I mean, that was with 32 teams. So this is like 16 more teams. I don't want to even do the math right now to figure out how many more games that is, like how many more matchups that is in group play alone. And then on top of that, you're going to have more games in tournament play. So yeah, it's definitely going to be much more diluted, much more. I don't even know what I haven't looked at the broadcast schedule much to even see if they're going to be doing like 2 channels with like 2 games on at once, or if it's going to be, because it used to be 1-on-1.
Well, because in the US, it'll be Fox Sports, and they'll have
Yeah.
a bajillion different subchannels. So with 32 teams, you have 64 matches. And with 48 teams, you have 104.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it
It's a big
is.
jump.
It is. And so, like, normally, if I'm watching, like I will say, because I didn't really answer your question as to which teams I would kind of keep an eye on, but like, I don't care about what the big clubs are doing early. Like, I'm more interested in, especially seeing what the first time World Cup participants are doing, like, because that's fun. You know, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how Curacao do, because they're probably going to get stomped. But like, just to see how much it means for them or for their fans to qualify for this and to see your team represented at this tournament. So like Curacao, Cabo Verde, Uzbekistan, and like Jordan on the Asia side, like those will be fun stories. I hope. I hope it's worth it for all the fans because like they're going to be paying a lot for the privilege of seeing it in person. But like, especially, I mean, the U.S. is still ostensibly a melting pot, and all of these countries are going to be pretty well represented in the various sort of diaspora communities. And I hope they enjoy it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the most we can hope for.
It'll be fun. So let me do this. Let's do a rapid fire prediction challenge. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, like a handful of questions. Don't think about it. Just give me an answer. And then if you want it, we can kind of circle back to anything in particular. If you think later on, you're like, actually, no, I changed my answer. That's okay.
Okay.
So the first one, how deep does Japan go?
Semis.
Okay. Who wins the whole damn thing?
France.
Golden boot prediction.
Oof. Probably Lamine Yamal, the Spanish kid.
Okay. Biggest surprise team. It's like a dark horse or, someone that kind of comes out of nowhere.
See, you would expect me to have this on the top of my head, but like the fact is, you do with 48 teams, you do have to go through the list and think about it.
Yeah.
Canada as co-hosts, I think they're maybe able to pull off a surprise.
Okay. Biggest disappointment.
Attendance, but if we're talking about teams, then probably England.
England. Oh, that's kind of normal.
Yeah, exactly. But
even as a casual viewer, I'm much aware of the regularly scheduled World Cup letdown that comes with English football. So, all right, and then final reflection: what do you count as a successful World Cup for Japan?
Quarterfinals. If you don't get past the round of 16, then we're going to have to do a lot of soul searching. But, I say the reason I say semis is because I do think that if they get to the quarterfinals, they can go as far as they want.
Yeah.
Hajime Moriyasu, he's talked about how they're not going in with the goal of getting to the quarters. They're going in with the goal of winning it. And I think it's easy for a manager to like say that and know that they're just like saying it to say it. But I think he believes it. And I think he actually he believes this team can do it. And whatever you think of Moriyasu's tactics, whatever you think of his management, whatever you think of his worldview, he has earned the benefit of the doubt for now. You look at the results in Qatar, you look at how the team is playing right now, I think like everyone is buying in.
So what kind of impact would that deep run have on the fans back in Japan?
It would be possibly Japan's greatest sporting accomplishment ever. This is tough because, like, what are you comparing things to? Are you comparing it to like individual achievements versus team achievements versus whatever? The Brave Blossoms beating South Africa at the 2015 Rugby World Cup versus, Japan getting through that tournament to, beating Ireland and getting to the quarterfinals versus Yuzuru Hanyu winning 2 gold medals for, like, you can go on a year, But if I'm going to compare to like baseball, Japan is one of half a dozen countries that gives a shit about baseball. Like, yes, Japan is one of the best in the world, but that's not a sport that the world plays. That's a sport that like 20 countries play seriously.
Yeah.
Since the West brought the sport to Japan, Japan has always been trying to catch up to the world. So much of Japanese soccer, the foundation is in these foreign influences. British sailors brought the sport here. German prisoners of war brought tactics. Brazil offered so much in terms of like a role model and like, the Nikkei diaspora and all that. So all of these influences have been coming in and like Japan has been trying to catch up and it's taken decades. And so that's why, like, beating Germany at the World Cup, beating Spain at the World Cup, like, that was the apprentice beating the master. But this is the first World Cup in which I think Japan will be seen as less of an underdog, less of a dark horse, and more or closer to a peer among the established top countries. And but I say closer. Closer isn't the same as equal.
Right.
And the only way that Japan is going to be on the same footing as the top European and South American countries is if they're standing on the same spot in the quarterfinals. And I think if they can get there, it's massive for Japan. It's massive for Japanese soccer, especially because the J League is transitioning to the European style calendar. So the new season, we're finishing up the transitional tournament in the next couple of weeks, and the new season will start on August 7th, I believe. So a deep run would engender a lot of positive sentiment towards soccer as a whole. And so that's going to boost attendance at J League games, not just in the J1, but also in the J2 and J3. Young Japanese players are going to get way more attention from European clubs. J League clubs are going to be able to ask so much more in terms of transfer fees. So, like, Japan's performance at the World Cup, like, not to oversell it, but it's crucial. Like, as the national team goes, so goes the nation. And, if they underperform, then the J League may be in a little, they're not going to go bankrupt, but, like, certainly the sentiment will dip back and there won't be as much momentum.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, right? Like the momentum that can just be carried off of this into the new soccer schedule that you were talking about just there. Like you're going right out of the World Cup, right into the J League. I mean, momentum there, just in general, it just breeds pride in the sport and then builds up a new potential that can come out of that. So it definitely doesn't do them any disservice to get that monkey off the back and get past the quarters.
The round of 16, they've gotten there 4 times, and just getting into the quarters, that's the big thing. And I think it speaks to how strong this team is that, like, we're not talking about getting into the quarters as the goal. We're talking about getting to the semis or maybe getting to the final as the goal. But if this team comes out hot, if they beat Netherlands in the first game, if they beat Tunisia in the second game, if they finish first in the group, let's say Morocco had to fight for second place and they're a little tired in the round of 32. They win that. They get to, like, the round of 16 against, like, I don't know, it could be France, it could be Ecuador, it could be, any number of I mean, the scenarios here are crazy. Like, if they finish third, so the top 8 third place teams from the groups will move on to the round of 32. So they could finish like a cheeky third and play France in the round of 32, or maybe play Ivory Coast or something like there's a lot of weird stuff that can happen.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, you can't look at it in terms of, like, gamesmanship or, like, trying to sneak into, like, a certain spot, which Japan has done that in the World Cup, like aiming to be second in the group so that they dodge someone big in the round of 16 or the quarterfinals. I think Nadeshiko Japan pulled that off in 2015 at the Women's World Cup. And it was kind of controversial at the time. But, like, I think that this Japan is good enough that they don't have to do that. I think they just have to go in wanting to win all their games. They just might, Look, I can click on, like, knockout stage simulators all day and get you scenarios in which it's like Japan, France in the quarterfinals, and Japan, Spain in the semis. And, well, like, Japan have beaten France in a friendly. Japan have beaten Spain at the World Cup. Who's to say?
All right. Well, that's kind of all the questions I have for you, man. I think we covered everything I wanted to talk about. But I do want to ask you, if you want to give you an opportunity to let people know about some upcoming work that you have going on or where people can follow you.
I have projects, nothing huge. This is my pre-World Cup media tour. I've been speaking to outlets from all over the world about Japan and their prospects. I just got galleys I was interviewed by Sweden's top newspaper for their World Cup preview magazine, so that should be coming out before the tournament. I'll be on a few more podcasts. I'll probably be on a few more podcasts. I've done a couple other previews in the last couple of months. go and look up the J Talk podcast. We did a special episode after the draw, and that's like, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty on player selection, we dove into the weeds. So if you want to learn more about that, go support the J Talk podcast because they're doing amazing stuff covering the J League week in, week out. Follow me on Blue Sky at iStartedTokyo.bsky.social, and when I have cool stuff to post about, I usually do it there.
Awesome. And LinkedIn. Don't forget LinkedIn. That's
Oh
where
yeah,
I
there you go. Yeah,
saw
watch
your
me
post
like
soliciting guests, and I'm like, hey, that's a good
yeah.
idea.
LinkedIn is a terrible site. Don't follow me there.
I
Like
know.
nobody should be following anyone on LinkedIn. Like I'm mainly on LinkedIn to message like people in the industry I know and to play the puzzles, because I know that when the revolution comes, I think faster than 95% of the CEOs, and you know.
But how will that help you with business to business sales?
Yeah, how will that help me with B2B AI generated sales, you know?
All right. So last question for you. Last question, short and sweet. If Japan wins the World Cup, what are you going to do? Like for New Orleans, when they had a guy named Buddy Diliberto. Buddy D is a radio person. He said if the Saints ever won the Super Bowl, he would wear a wedding dress during the Super Bowl parade. And unfortunately, he passed away before the Saints won the Super Bowl. So the next guy that kind of took over from him on the radio did the wedding dress thing in his honor during the Super Bowl parade back in 2010. So what would you do?
What would I do? Okay, I have a sincere answer.
Okay.
Which is because I can't I'm not sure like what fun one I would do, because I mean that game will be at like 3:00 in the morning here. I will be exhausted. I will be going to sleep. No, if Japan win, I'll write the book about it. Jeez.
There you go. You got to write your book.
Yeah, I keep threatening. Doug knows I've been threatening to write a book for how long now? A while. I keep threatening to write a book in the hopes that if I say it to enough people, eventually enough of my friends will like hold me accountable and make me do it. But I feel like if Japan get as far as I think they can get, then I've got no excuses. You know, if they can, if Moriyasu can get this team to the promised land, I can get out, 100,000 words on how we did it.
Goals. All right, Dan. Well, thanks again for coming on last second and working with me. As people can hear, I'm kind of a little horsey now. I was starting out human in the beginning, but I'm like, just all the talking. It's got me a little, what do I call it? Basashi?
Yeah. In a few more minutes, you'll be Uma Musume.
Yeah.
Nobody listening is.
I was gonna say that earlier to you when I made the Basashi message. I'm like, I'm not gonna go that far into the weeds. We'll just say Basashi. But yeah, I'm a pretty horse princess. So.
Yes, you are the prettiest of horse princesses.
All right. I never thought that would be on this episode of the podcast, but here we are. So I think that means it's time to wrap this up. So again, Dan, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to talking to you about the World Cup as it's going on later in June.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
And that's a wrap on this special World Cup preview bonus episode. Thank you so much for tuning into the Krewe of Japan podcast. And of course, a huge thank you to Dan Orlowitz for joining us once again and helping us break all of this down. Seriously, if you're not already following Dan's work online, you're missing out on some fantastic coverage of Japanese soccer and other sports alike. And hey, for you soccer fans out there here in New Orleans or in the New Orleans area, Japan Society New Orleans is planning a Japan v Netherlands watch party on June 14th. So come on out, cheer on the Samurai Blue with the crew and fellow Japan Society New Orleans members. Just keep an eye on Japan Society's calendar and social medias for more details. And of course, Season 7 is right around the corner, coming in real hot. So don't forget to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. So while you're there, maybe do us a solid and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Hey, can't hurt to ask, right? Every single one of those ratings and reviews helps other listeners discover Krewe of Japan and join our global crew. Or, maybe just let a friend know about us. Any and all support is incredibly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your World Cup predictions. So share those with us on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, X, whatever you call it. Just search Krewe of Japan Podcast to stay in the loop for future episodes, because we got some coming. Upcoming Japan Society events, we got some of those coming too. And other Japan-related content. That's KreweofJapan. Or if you want to reach out to us directly, just send us an email at crewofjapanpodcast@gmail.com. We always love hearing from our listeners, so never hesitate. Just send us an email. But that's it for today. So until next time, which is hopefully season 7. So see you then. Looking to start your own podcast and don't know what platform to use? Tell me about it. When we started the Krewe Japan podcast, we tried a bunch of the big name recording platforms, but always came back to the one we're still currently using to this day, Zencastr. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. In addition to its high audio and video quality for podcast production, Zencastr provides a full suite of production tools to record, produce, and publish studio quality content from the comfort of your home. Just log in through your browser and start recording. It's that simple. For us, we simply send out links to our guests and they join the lobby. But before you know it, it's all done and you have your studio quality audio and up to 4K video right there ready for you, right when you finish. The best part is having their multi-layered backups to ensure that your recordings are in the highest quality, regardless of anyone's internet connection stability. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcasts in one place and distribute to all the major destinations. It's really that easy. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code KREWOFJAPAN, KREWEOFJAPAN, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's your time to share your story.